Recently, I've been seeing these videos about building invisible PC desk setups, which is very cool. But what if we did the exact opposite? Introducing the completely visible PC. Alright, yeah, that's kind of lame, but in this video, we're gonna make the PC the undoubtable center of attention in a PC desk setup. And don't worry, we definitely won't make a balloon PC like AI wants, which means we need to make it worth looking at. And so to do so, let's look up some cool PC cases. Whoa, this pyramid one is sick. I've never used one of these cases that look like a transformer, and they are cool, but I don't think it really fits my idea because, well, I need something with a lot of glass. Then I remembered that back at Computex earlier this year, this new case company called Haven announced the HS420, which has a single piece of glass that curves around the front and the side. And this honestly might be exactly what I'm looking for. And so with a little bit of networking magic, well, we have ourselves the HS420 vGPU variant. I've never seen a PC case that comes with gloves. And check out that curved glass panel. That is nuts. I'm thinking this will do the trick, but now it's time for the soul-pondering experience of ripping the component guts out of our current PC case and shoving them into this new body, a new home, if you will. And while doing so, the philosophical question that is on everyone's mind is, will this action create a new, different PC, or will it be the same PC as before? After all, none of the internal components are changing at all. And from the operating system's perspective and the hardware's perspective, it is quite literally the same PC. But yet, it feels so different. It's like the beginning of the ship of Theseus, where at some point, the incremental changes, the piece-by-piece replacement of components surely must lead to a different ship altogether. Right? What do I know? I'm no philosopher. I'm just a dude with too many PC components. But okay, cool. The easy part is done. Now, how in the world are we going to make this PC worthy of being the center of attention on our desk? And just because it looks nice doesn't mean it's going to be useful, right? But, well, here's where this little piece of metal comes to the rescue. Now, again, as you can see, there's no front panel intake in this case here, which means there's quite a bit of room to play with. By default, this space is allocated for a crap ton of hard drive and SATA SSDs storage, or you could use that space for, say, water cooling, which is pretty nice for a mid-tower case of this size. But we're gonna use neither of those, and instead we're gonna use this space to make our own all-in-one PC. Bear with me. You see, this middle piece here is actually a VESA mount that comes with this case. And if we go ahead and remove all of those hard drive bays from this panel, well, actually, we don't need this panel at all, and in its place, plop in this VESA mount, we should theoretically be able to install up to a 14-inch monitor vertically within this space. And so I grabbed this 14-inch monitor off of Amazon for like 60 bucks. Honestly, it was the very first one. I just typed in 14-inch VESA portable monitor, and this is what we got. Taking a look at it now, I am a bit worried about the clearance of not having enough space for this to actually fit. And well, neither the case nor the monitor came with screws for the actual VESA mount, so after some digging, these are the only ones that I have on hand that will fit the threads. They might just stick out a little bit. But that said, they do serve the purpose of holding up the screen. So now we need to find a way to connect our monitor and our PC cable-wise, which doesn't seem like it should be that much of a challenge on paper until you realize that our GPU ports are actually on the outside of the case, and the monitor's on the inside. And I don't really want to drill a hole in this case just for this. But thankfully, due to this dual chamber design with these convenient gaps in the outside layer of the case, we can honestly slot our HDMI and USB power cable from our monitor pretty seamlessly into our GPU and motherboard. It does seem like it was intentionally designed that way, but I was not expecting it to be that easy. That's pretty cool. Although, that said, I'm gonna jinx myself because on the other end of these cables, we are running into a bit of clearance issues. The placement of the micro HDMI port on the screen just so happens to interfere with this metal edge of the case, forcing the screen to, well, bow outwards beyond the case's perimeter. And if you instead flip around the screen so the cables plug in to the top side, it honestly is really close, but again, still doesn't quite fit. And so rotating it back to the starting position, I ended up using those super long VESA mount screws to my advantage by pulling the monitor as far out away from the case as I could. And surprisingly, that was just enough space to make sure that the HDMI and the USBs were able to plug in without any type of interference. And just like that, this entire 14-inch monitor quite literally fits pixel perfect inside of this case. Check it out, it's nuzzled up against the glass here. That's crazy. But now it's time for the moment of truth. Will this actually post a signal by drawing power from our motherboard? Well, if we turn on the computer, we can see that, well, booyah, baby, let's go! We now have ourselves an internal monitor that we can use as our daily driver, so our PC can firmly stand in the middle of our desk as the center of attention. And with our vertical GPU mount and these angled fans, this is honestly a really cool way to honor this PC by keeping putting it in the limelight instead of, say, trying to make it as out of the way as possible. Now, is having a 14-inch vertical screen ideal for playing video games or, say, editing videos or being productive?
Nope.
Not really. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't ideal for consuming vertical content. I do also think there's a world where you can add another monitor stacked on top of this PC in the middle of our desk, kind of like a really expensive monitor stand, and that definitely would solve the gaming and productivity challenge of this current build. But even still, overall, I gotta say I'm impressed with how this case completely revitalized this PC, and ultimately makes it worthy of staring at in the middle of our desk. Let me know what you would change or alter about this setup to keep the PC as the center of attention, but maybe make it a bit better than what I have here. I'll be reading through your comments for suggestions. After using this Haven HS420 case, it does have a handful of features that are legitimately nice to have in a mid-tower case. The obvious main feature is this Unishield heat-formed glass, which is a single piece that curves around the front and side panel, which is striking to look at. I actually kind of like how the corner distorts what's behind it when you're looking through it. It just gives off a unique look. But beside that, I'm actually more drawn to the design of these back fans. If you look at these from the inside and the outside, you can see that the fans themselves are entirely encapsulated. That's again due to this dual chamber design where the case actually has multiple layers. And one result of that is you only see the blades of these fans. You don't see the outside chassis at all, which I'm sure exists somewhere else, but I can't think of another case that has the same look. I think it's really neat. It does make it a bit more challenging to quickly access or service those fans, but again, for a similar reason why that monitor was so easy to plug into our case, there's all of these extra little holes for the fan cables to easily access the backside or the motherboard. And speaking of cable management, well, I suck at cable management, but this case actually has something that is also kind of unique where it recommends where to put specific cables. So if you're a cable management newbie like me, it says, hey, you know what? You should put the motherboard 24 pin in this slot right here. So not only are there cable management channels available for you, but they're designed in a way where they anticipate which ones are going to be in which locations. That's one of those touches where it's very clear the designers who made this case spent a lot of time thinking about how it's actually going to be used and not just throwing random parts together. Another thing that's a bit unique, because there's no frontal intake, right? You can't pull in air through glass. This bottom back fan is actually an intake fan. And on top of that, you'll notice that the entire case is actually elevated a couple inches off of the table. And that little bit of space allows for more fresh air to be pulled up from the bottom of the case to flow upwards. And again, going back to this extra piece of glass for this vertical mounted design, maybe this exists, but I've never seen it. The way that it channels cool air from the bottom to bounce off that glass and then bounce off the glass side panel to bounce into the intake of the GPU, that's kind of wild. Now, I mentioned this vertical GPU mounted version was around $70 more expensive. The MSRP of the two variations, the HS420 and the HS420 vGPU, I'll put up on screen. I believe the HS420 is $200 and the vGPU model is $269. They should be available to purchase as soon as this video is up, so if you're watching this, you should be able to buy these. I'll go ahead and leave a link below if you want to learn more, but these things are very clearly designed for enthusiast PC builders, both price tag wise, but also build quality and feature set wise. I mean, I haven't really touched on the build quality yet, but I mean, the fact that this is a single piece of glass that is manufactured to this precision is so cool. It doesn't feel cheap, it doesn't feel flimsy, it doesn't feel like it's gonna break. Even when you're removing it, they actually add these little slots so you don't just pull it straight up and down. Here you can see this little channel, so you actually have to pull up to the right, which does make it a bit more secure. It's not gonna fall out if you happen to tip it upside down. And on top of that, there's this little extra like claw piece on the end of the front here, which helps catch the glass. So even if you remove it with one hand, it's not just gonna fall to one side, which honestly, it's a really good design. The rest of the case too does feel very sturdy, especially because, you know, when you remove the glass, it doesn't have one of the 4 pillars to help support it. And despite 2 of the sides being completely glass, the rest of this case has this really neat ribbed mesh kind of design, which aesthetically I actually think looks pretty neat, but also helps with a ton of airflow. I do also really like how the power button in the front panel seamlessly flow and hide into this design. Again, they could have slapped this on in a completely different way that I'm sure would have been a lot cheaper and easier to manufacture, but this way is so cohesive. Now, if you do happen to get the vGPU version of this case, like the one in this video, I highly recommend the very first thing you should do is remove that bracket altogether, because likely the last thing you'll want to do is install the graphics card, but the vertical mounting bracket comes pre-installed, and it's kind of just gets in the way for most of the part. Like, you can't install the motherboard with it being there, and you also can't can access this bottom back fan very easily with it installed as well. I tried not removing it for a lot of my build and I just kind of regretted it. Just take it out. You can always just easily install it back when you need it. It's way easier that way. And speaking of the vertical kit in general, well, $60, right? So it's $60 more expensive than the base HS420 case, but with it you get the PCIe 5th gen riser, you get the GPU bracket that actually like sits over top of the slots, as well as you get this angled bottom fan bracket. Now, the one thing about this case that I wish it did include was case fans. It doesn't come with any case fans, and that's kind of a bummer because there's so many different ways to put fans inside of this case. You can put a radiator up top, on bottom if you really wanted to, on the side. It would have been really nice, especially at this price point, to include even say like the back two fans within this case. You know, I reached out to Haven about this and they said they'd rather include no fans at all than just to toss in cheap fans, which I gotta say is commendable given it's targeting more enthusiast consumers who likely already have performance fans to use. But the other thing they mentioned is that they're also working on their own performance fans, which may or may not be included in this case in the future. So if that ends up being a thing, I'll pin a comment down below. All that said, this case is really neat. The fact that it comes with this VESA mounting kit just it begs this to have a monitor inside of it. Whether you use it for your main driver in the middle of your desk or just, you know, off to the side so you can have cool little cartoon GIFs on that screen, well, that's up to you. But with that, I think that's all I have for you today. So a big shout out to Haven for sending out this HS420 vGPU for me to take a look at. Thank you all for watching. I've been mryeester, your tech tinkerer, and I'll catch you in the next one.